My name is Alfredo Terrazas. Today's date is 2/27/2021, and this is my submission for CIRC02 Attempt B. Once again, we'll be working with the same code as Attempt C. Nothing will change. The code will be the same as I've left it. It has been modified for it to be easier for me to understand, but essentially the code is at its core the same. So starting again from the source code, in this attempt, we're gonna go ahead and walk through all 4 of the already predetermined patterns. But this time we will go through all 4 of them, not just the first one like we did in attempt C. Once again, a quick overview. The top line before the void setup will simply give a variable name and a data type to all of the pins for the Arduino, and of course for the sketch for the source code. Once again, starting right at the top, void setup is going to go ahead and do us a favor with this one line, save us the trouble having to type out each individual pin for output. With the pin mode, this will just save us the trouble and do all of them all the way up to the 7th pin that we need. So this will take care of all of this right here in the setup. No need to worry about having to do it for each individual pin. Once again, by starting from the top, we're going to do a void loop for the 4 patterns. They're going to be in order, one after another, no loop. Then we got one after another loop. We got one at a time. And then we got in and out. So once again, quick recap. For the void loop, for the void no loop, it's going to individually turn on each LED and then delay between each one, and then after that part of the code is done, it will then run the next part of the code, which will individually turn each LED off in the reverse order with the same delay time in the center in between each one, which of course can be adjusted. And just to show it really quick, it is still running that exact same source code in the same manner. Moving on over to the next pattern, we've got one after another loop. This one essentially does the exact same thing that the other loop does, but it does so in a much more compressed way. Instead of having to individually turn each pin on and then off in reverse order, it uses an equation, and it uses the for loop to use that equation to turn them all on and then turn them all off automatically without having to do it one individually. Using the for command, it's gonna go ahead and determine that if integer I equals 0 and is either less than or equal to 7, it'll go up it'll go up a value, essentially moving on to the next pin. And it'll start from, of course, from 0, which is going to be pin number 2 on the Arduino, all the way up to 7. Once the value would go up above 7, then this code would stop right there, and then we have another code that will then determine that if I is equal to 7 or is greater than or equal to 0, it will then subtract a value from variable I, from variable name I, and then it will determine that it's going to go ahead and turn those LED pins to low, essentially turning them off in the reverse order, giving us the exact same effect as the last pattern, but it only requires these 2 lines of code as to having to write each individual pin in the previous one. So if I go back up here to the setup, we're gonna go ahead and change to the second pattern. Take off the slashes so it can turn into actual code instead of a comment. Gonna go ahead and compile it. We're gonna go ahead and upload it. And once it's uploaded, you're gonna see the effect is the same. It's just been written in a way that is much more concise and a lot easier to read and doesn't require as much typing. So that is going to cover one after another loop. These 2 essentially do the same thing. Once again, we're gonna go ahead and turn this into a comment. We're gonna go ahead and compile it. Where's my mouse? And we're gonna move on to the next one. After another loop, we're gonna have one at a time. So we have the code block for that one right here. This one, let me readjust the focus there. This one is going to start again at the top with the delay time integer value, which again is going to determine the time in between the delay of the pins, in between the pins lighting up and dimming back down. But in this case, it's going to use a different sort of formula to determine how the LEDs are going to work. In this case, it's going to use, once again, the for loop, but instead of just simply lighting them up in order, there's going to be a second line of code that is going to calculate that if the next pin is activated, the previous one will be deactivated, essentially lighting up the next pin or LED on that pin while turning the previous one off. And it's gonna go ahead and use these two codes right here to turn on and then to turn off the nodes as they go down the order. And we're gonna have this one line code right here that is going to go ahead and loop it back around once I equals 0, because if it tries to subtract from 0, it's going to get -1, which does not exist. So by including this code, it's going to loop back. It's going to say, oh, okay, all right, we're at the end, let's go ahead and loop back, and it's going to start back at the beginning. It's going to go from 2 to 9, and then after 9, it's going to go right back to 2, and it's going to circle back around from beginning to end. So to go ahead and demonstrate it, we're going to go ahead and go back to the 4, and we're going to go ahead and take off the 2 slashes to turn this from a comment to an actual code. I'm going to go ahead and compile it. I'm going to go ahead and upload it. And you're going to see this is the pattern that this one creates, starting from the beginning all the way to the end, and then once it determines that the pins have reached the end, it's going to loop back to the beginning, and as it goes on to the next LED, it turns off the one behind it. For the final one, let me go ahead and just turn this back into a comment, recompile it. At the very end, we're going to have a more or less similar but different effect source code block. This one's going to be called in and out. It's going to again use the delay time, same integer, same variable name, same value. It's going to use the same calculations as the last code, block, as the last pattern, but it's going to do so in 2 ways. It's going to start from 3 and 4 and then go out from on the opposite direction, and then it's going to go ahead and light the nodes behind it and the nodes in front of it, and just like the last one, it's going to use the same calculation, and it still includes that if it's 0, it's going to loop back to turn off the pin behind it. So essentially it's going to start from the center and then go out. So to demonstrate it, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and turn that one into actual code, recompile it, and then upload it. And you're gonna see it does the same thing, and it just loops back and forth. The wires here remain the same. There's nothing new from them. We still have ground and power to 5 volt. Each has its own resistor. Each one has its own pin from 2 to 9 on the digital pins. The only thing we're changing is the code and the behavior in which the pins are going to work. And that concludes my CIRC02 Attempt B.